Roots 101 Deeply Rooted. From the vibrant and storied heart of America, brought to you by the Roots 101 African American Museum. This is the Deeply Rooted Podcast, where we pay homage to the unsung heroes, the pillars of our community, the inventors, the artists, the activists, and our ancestors by highlighting Black excellence of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Your guide on this journey, none other than the passionate and insightful Lamont Collins, a visionary, a mentor, a scholar, and most importantly, a griot of African American history and culture. So sit back, tune in, and let's dive deep into the rich soil as we get deeply rooted.
You know, at the museum, we talk about legacies matter. And when you're able to be around someone that lived that, that's super special. To see young people to get engaged in the political system, because we know voting matters. Matter of fact, this might be the most deciding vote we have this year. And we need kids to make sure they vote. This is the right time and right place for the right leaders like you. So tell me, at 16 and 14 years old, how did you end up on a bridge?
We wondered,
Yeah, go ahead.
we wondered that for a long time. How did we end up doing what we did at that age? You got me all emotional here. I'm trying to get.
That's what we try to do. We wanted to be emotional.
We started out being invited to join SNCC with John Lewis. And as young children, and everybody asked us how we felt, we were children. We didn't have any fear. And we were willing to do what we had to do for our parents to vote. My father was a man that pulled the chair to the radio to listen to the current affairs, because we didn't have a TV. And one thing he wanted to do was vote. When they went to the polls to register, if they couldn't count the jelly beans in the jar, or if they couldn't name all the counties in Alabama, they were not allowed to vote. So our goal was to set out so our parents could vote. And all the other people in the neighborhood, because we weren't old enough to vote. I'll let Denise tell you more about it.
Yes, it's basically what Al said. To watch your parents be humiliated every time they would try and go register to vote. Count the beans in a jar. How would they know how many beans were in a jar? Why would you even ask a question like that? How many counties, even though there were 67 counties in Alabama, name all of those counties? I was in school. I could name all of those counties, but to watch them be humiliated every time they went to try and register to vote. So we decided we have to do something to help them get registered to vote. So this one night, Alice and I had a conversation. We were going to go to the school and we were going to tell, because at that time the marches and the demonstrations and things were going on, and we couldn't get out of school to go to the demonstrations. So Alice and I, we decided the next day we're going to go to school. We're going to go knock on every classroom door and tell the kids, come on, let's go. We're going to go march. We're going to go march. We're going to go demonstrate. And the principal came in with a PA system and he said, get back to your class. If you don't, you're going to be expelled first, and you will not graduate. And I tell kids today, not so. Not only did I graduate from high school, I graduated from college. Not so. You have to do what you have to do when you have to do it. But as fate have it, the next day, of course, we went back to our classes because we didn't, the same afternoon, the principal went downtown Selma, and I don't know the reasons as to why he went, but he got beat on the head with a billy club. He came back the next day, came over the PA system, and he said, everybody that want to go demonstrate, you can leave and go now and go demonstrate. But God.
To listen to you and see the emotions that's coming out after all these years. When you were on that bridge, because people really don't understand the march, right? It wasn't just coming across the bridge. You started somewhere else and walked to the bridge, right? Can you tell us how that all worked out?
To get to that bridge, there was a lot happening. I mean, the prison camp, where nobody knew where we were for a few days, that was trauma. We walked to the bridge, but we went through all of that before we even got to walk.
So you went, they put you in a prison camp.
We went to prison. We were in a prison camp. He put us on a bus, drove us off to the prison camp, and we were there with no leadership and nobody knowing where we were.
Oh, man, the police did it?
I wouldn't call them the police.
All right.
There were a lot of people in Selma that were deputized during this time, and they were your drugstore owners, your grocery store owners. They all wore badges at that time, and more came on Bloody Sunday. There was more, everybody that you could think of there that didn't look like us had a bag. So we would just put on the bus by the bus driver, the guards putting us on the bus. The bus drivers drove us to this camp. It was a prison camp. I didn't know, couldn't remember where it was and everything, but talked to two guys that was working, and they had a lot of FBI information that they shared with me and told me where the camp was, and it was in Thomas, Alabama, going towards Mobile. And we were there, for 4 days, and nobody knowing where we were.
So, but you guys worked together. Y'all never broke apart.
We didn't break apart. We were there. We didn't stay together, but we were at the same place, but not together. We even have different stories about where we were and what we ate there. One thing they did, though, they took all the prisoners out of their cells, along with their mattresses, and put them in the courtyard and had us sleep on the cold floor. Mind you, we didn't leave home planning to go to prison. So that's where we were for 4 days. And I just want to tell you a little bit before we got to the bridge that happened that was just, it was traumatized.
We're going to have questions at the end. If you can hold, we will have. Well, if you got to ask now, go ahead. Go ahead.
What was the rationale for y'all going to prison? I mean, it's like we're going to demonstrate, and they said, okay, we're going to take you to jail. Did they tell you why? Did they?
They didn't have to tell us why. We were doing something, we were color folks. We had no business out there demonstrating, demanding, making any demands from them. We were not allowed to do that. We weren't allowed to go sit at the counters. We weren't allowed to go in the stores, in the restaurants and sit down at counters and eat. That was not allowed. Then if you saw a drinking fountain, it said for colored only and whites only. We had to go drink out of a different fountain if you wanted something to drink. So no, they didn't have to tell us why they were taken, because we were doing something that we should not have been doing as a black person, as a colored person. We should not have been doing that.
And they were a little afraid because we were children, we were young. And John Lewis knew what he was doing when he came and solicited the SNCC organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordination. We couldn't be violent. We couldn't fight back. And we were out there every day. And they got tired of us. And this was gonna scare us off. That we got locked up before that, but they let us go. They used cow prods to get us on the bus. If you don't know what that is, when you take a cow to the stockyard and you want to get them going, that's what they used on us. They load us up, they would take us locally and let us go home. But this one day, I guess they were really tired. They put us on a bus and took us out of town. So they were tired of us, and the children, the young folk, were not stopping. Like she said, we were threatened, not just by our principal. Our principal was following instructions from the superintendent that if you don't get your students, and we weren't the only school, there were, the lot of schools all around that did that, and they were threatened to fail all of us. And I graduated before my sister did, and I graduated with honors. I was second in my class, and so that's no, you know, that did not stop us from doing what we did. They were tired of us. They didn't need a reason.
So much we don't know. Even I don't know. So when you went on that march, how long? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? Tell me how long this actually happened before you even got to the bridge. How many days? 3 days, 4 days, months? What?
We went through this for months and we went through this for weeks on weekend. You know, they would put us in jail one day and we had the nerve, the audacity to go march again the next day. So, and every time we would march, we would go to jail. And as Alan said, we would stay in jail for a day. Then we could go home and we had the audacity to come back the next day. They would put us in jail. They even, Alice doesn't remember this time, but one day they put us in, at that time, the community center in Selma. We were locked in there. They had chains like those chains you saw over there. They had chains that locked the door from the outside. It was about 200 of us in this one room. If something had happened, we would have all perished in that room because we had no way of getting out.
I'm stunned. There's things am I wrong?
I know a lot of people remember Bloody Sunday, but the things that really, we were trained, we went to mass, we had to be trained. And I said, you would see more ladies or more girls there than you did boys. And there was one reason, because they could not stand to be beaten without fighting back. My nephew tell a story that my brother wanted to come from Michigan down there, and my mother discouraged him. My father never drove us to one meeting. It was my mom. He went the other way, and he went the other way for a reason, because they would have killed them quickly. Most of the people, there were some boys, but most of them were female.
So as a young person in a household where the women were protesting, the men kind of fell back. I knew they were doing something. Did it ever make you look at men any different, or they never lost any strength in your eye?
No, it didn't make me look at men any different because we knew that as Alan said, the men would not take the abuse and walk away nonviolently. We were taught nonviolent. We didn't fight back, but the guys would have. So no, I did not, and I still don't look at men any different because of that.
Well, let's talk about when you got to the bridge, right? How many days did it take to get there? When you got there, Bloody Sunday. What can you remember the most about that Bloody Sunday?
Well, it only took, the bridge is only like, a half a mile from the church. So we marched to the bridge and not knowing what was waiting for us on the other side of the bridge, we get to the other side and somehow Alice and I were in the front, the first few rows. Maybe I was following Alice and she decided she's gonna take me to the front. But we were almost at the front of the line. And as soon as we got, the bridge goes at an arch like this. And as soon as we got to the other side of that bridge, like going down, everybody, the grocery man, the pharmacist, the banker, the preacher, that did not look like us, had on gas masks, billy clubs, and cow prods. And as soon as we stepped down of that bridge, the tear gas, they exploded the tear gas. And the only thing, I don't know if I passed out or what, the next thing I remember, two of the young guys, students there, had me carrying me, pulling me away from the brunt of that tear gas. And when I woke up, came through, they had me laying down near the river until I could get up and walk myself.
And my remembrance of that, we got separated at that point. And where you see in all the pictures where John Lewis is getting beating across the head and everything, on one side. And the reason I know where we were, because when they took him that way, I don't know where Denise went, I went the opposite way, and I ran myself. Because we had been taught, you know, if anything happened like that, go towards the water, the river. And the river was there. And I have learned and met people that were under that bridge laying down with me that I didn't know before. I know them now because we shared the same story. But I went down and I got so much tear gas, I couldn't see. I just ran where I know I had to go. And I laid down there. And when I recovered and I could open my eyes and see, I was so angry. And I tell everybody, I don't ever remember being that angry before. But what I said, laying on that ground under that bridge, I am ready to fight more. And I had that in me, and I was ready to fight again. So that we recovered from that Bloody Sunday, and we went back. Our parents, my mother, picked us up, we took us home, and they started planning for the next march. Guess who was planning for the next march? We were planning for the next march, getting ready to go, and Martin Luther King wasn't with us on Bloody Sunday, but that second march, when the whole world, I thought I saw more people than I had ever seen in my life come to Selma that day. And they were there with that march, and that was Turnaround Tuesday. And you would find a lot of people there. There were people that lost their life doing that. Reverend Reed from Massachusetts, he lost his life. There were like people from all over the world, all people that didn't look like us. There was a lot of people on that second march. We didn't go. We went to the end. We knelt and prayed with Martin Luther King leading us in prayer. And then we turned around and went back to the church. We were waiting, and we didn't know what we were waiting for, but we were waiting for permission to go to march. And that was the third march, where we went all the way. And there was not as many people, but it was still too many people to go all the way because of the 2-lane highway from Selma to Montgomery. And I told my sister, I said, I didn't raise my hand. How did we get to be one of the 300 to go all the way? But my mother had us well packed, a lot of socks and cheap shoes, and we were ready to make that march on the third time. And God has it that we would be 2 of the 300 that walked all the way and camped out on that highway 80 all the way.
Well, I don't know what to say. I want to cry, but I'm not. But just the sheer strength of who you are and what you are, to let us know that young people can stand up and make a difference. And I had can't think of his name now. He was the original Black Panther party leader. Remember we brought him to the Roots. But anyway, I think of him anyway. But he was the original Black Panther, and they put him in jail. He was in jail for a long time, and he said even when everything was over, he wasn't bitter, but he was better. How do you feel about bitter and being better?
I was not bitter. We were traumatized, and back then you didn't know anything about. You didn't know nobody knew about mental health. We were traumatized. We were broken. And to tell you how I never talked about it. And a lot of people, moved on ahead. And this great sister here, she sitting right here on the front row. She was there. We didn't know each other, and she got to meet the people later on. I did not go to a celebration because I said, for me, it was not a celebration. I did not go to Selma. We still, had connections, still got home there, but I did not go there. I had not walked across that bridge and have not walked across that bridge but one time since 1965. I would drive, but I didn't want that feel of walking across the bridge. And we never talked about it until you saw a picture up here, the 50th anniversary. That's when I came out, and it all started with a Black History moment in church. And we have the kids doing Black History moment, and they would portray like they were Martin Luther King and have the hat, and then they would say, I am Martin Luther King. And somebody asked me to do myself. And I thought, you must, do myself. So just tell them about 5 minutes. And I walked across the podium in church. And I just told the story about the tear gas and on the bridge. And then I said, my name is Alice Moore. And people at the church said, are you talking about yourself? That's how long I had been there and nobody knew. But we would mention it sometime, but people would say, I don't want to hear that old stuff. We don't want to hear that. And I mean, the younger people, they didn't want to hear that. So when I did that, there was one young lady, and I have to, look her up right now. She's still around. She came and got me. She said, you're going to have to come to the Martin Luther King Center and do Black History and speak for it. I said, I don't do that. She said, but you just did. I said, no. She said, well, do the same thing you just did. And she coerced me to go to the King Center downtown Atlanta, to do that same thing for their Black History program. And in that setting was the leader from the SCLC.
Yeah, well, we heard the same story. Wilma Collins Randolph, who was the 5th survivor of the 4 girls that died in Birmingham. A lot of history makes it sound like all the little girls died. She was a survivor. She came to the museum. And she didn't talk about what happened to her in the bombing. She said for 30 years. He said people around her didn't talk about it. Her family didn't talk about it. And then when people found out who she was and when she finally started talking, it took her 30 years to tell her story. So I could see the trauma you're talking about that we deal with. But I tell you what, without you guys, we wouldn't be able to deal with the trauma we deal with today. Is that right? So let's do questions from the audience if they have a question for you. Anybody have questions? Please do. Go ahead.
Okay, it was the young people who were organizing and mobilizing and demonstrating. But what part was it adults as far as training the youth to get out and organize, or did they go with you? Were they taught other demonstrations? I know people came from all over. And then the aftermath, how did people stay in contact after you got that right?
Well, there were some adults, that were in the march. Not the focus were on the children and the young people. That was the focus. So there were so many young people. There were adults that there. Matter of fact, Mr. Sally, he was like one of the oldest foot soldiers. I thought he was old as my father because he used to come around and talk to my father all the time. But I found out, after my father died at 90, he was still walking around, and he just died a few months ago. And he was the oldest foot soldier, and his name was George Sally. And
So wasn't a lot of older people on the bridge? I didn't know that.
there was not a lot of older people, but they were older. There were some older than we were on the bridge. There were a few of them. That was just, we were teenagers, and we focused on the teenagers because we could do it. And we had more, well, we were younger. And it's like my mother wouldn't attempt to try to walk to Montgomery, but they used the children and they used us for that reason. But there were adults.
Like when I talked to the newspaper and they talked about you guys coming, everybody assumed people were so much older. And they said, well, I don't think that many people's living today. And then, you know, it just show you how much we don't know about our history. That it really was a young people's march. And that's what you're telling me, right?
Well, it was. It's like we're in our 70s now, but there are some people that
have the talent.
are older than us, you know. Still 21. We were 16 and 14, but there were some kids that were a little bit younger than 14 that was there, that I had met with their sisters. And that's why we went, because she wouldn't have been able to go without me. It was like we had to go together. So you found younger people. There were some older people there, and there are a lot of people living. But let me tell you about the people and how the world gets at people. Because there are some foot soldiers that don't want you to know other foot soldiers. There are a lot of foot soldiers still there. When I tried to get some together, there are still some like me that won't talk about it. They don't want to have any parts of it. And then there are those foot soldiers who want to do things and not want to include other foot soldiers. There are not many in Selma, but they're all around. There's a bunch of them in Atlanta. There's some in Savannah. That, you know, there were 7 schools, county schools they call. We were 2 miles across the bridge. And then there was a big city school, it was called Hudson High at that time, and it was downtown. They recognized all of those students from that school from downtown. Most of them, a lot of them were members of Brown Chapel Church. And even if you go there today and you look at the plaque that they have outside of Brown Chapel, and I just did that in March. I didn't look at it before, but I looked at it in March. They have the name of those foot soldiers. And then down below, you'll see students of Tipton High School. That was my school, 2 miles away. So they list you as, and them. And it's a shame what the world do to people after all of that trauma we went through, that it's like that. But that's the way it is displayed. They are separate. There are a lot of foot soldiers living. A lot of them still living. But they are not recognized. There are some that have tried to go to events with other ones, and they walk in and they will say, you're not a foot soldier. Nobody was branded a foot soldier. You were only branded here and here. There's no brand to tell who, and I don't know of anybody who wants to just claim they were a foot soldier. That wasn't, and there are a lot of people that's profiting off of it too. There are a lot of people that are profiting off of it. So don't let anybody tell you there are no foot soldiers there. There are foot soldiers.
Please ask question.
Trauma, when we talk about that, and mental health. What have you done?
The trauma and that you spoke about, and I'm bringing it up front just today because it's mental health. Have you got what you need to become as whole as you can?
I hope so. But like Alice talked about it long before I did. I only started talking about it when Charles, we have a family call every week, and I don't know how the conversation came up, but we kind of had a conversation about it. And that's when I started talking about it. And I think I was about 70 years old. So you're talking from 14 to 70 years old is when I started talking about it. I had friends after they found out, like, we didn't know you did that. Why you never said it? I said, it never came up. So and then I think about it sometime. I said, it's like, I'm thinking that if a person is abused, and normally when that person is abused, they don't tell anybody, and you just hope and pray it goes away. So never got any professional help, but I think with my faith that I have been able to survive it and can talk about it today. But there was no school counseling back then or any of that. So I never had any counseling. Did you have any counseling?
No, I never had any counseling either. My thing happened when I started to talk about it more and share it more. And I have my moments, like I still have not been able to sit through one of these sessions without shedding a tear, because it comes back. I can, as long as I'm not talking about it or going deeper, it's okay. But when you sit down to remember, and the things that get me to now and get me down is when I see other foot soldiers trying to discount other foot soldiers, and that kind of get me down too, because some have written books and some have done this and done that, which is good, but don't discount the other ones because they didn't write a book or didn't talk about it or whatever.
But you do see yourself as a survivor.
Oh, yes. My father got, our surviving thing and our best thing we saw is when the right to vote was signed in August that year. The neighbors on the back of the truck putting chairs on there, carrying everybody to the poll. My father was registered to vote. They voted before he passed away at 90. They all were registered to vote. And that was like a hallelujah moment.
And then I think too, I'm the president of the Democratic Party Club in my community. I worked that, and I did run for office and came in first place with that. So to me, I think that helped me a lot to say what happened to me back then and look at me now. It's on you, and shame on you for trying to hold me back. I'm going to show you who I am.
Let me ask a question real quick. How did you feel when Barack Obama became president?
I think that was one of the happiest days, besides getting the voters' right done, was for him to become president.
In regards to, because you stated that change is sort of gone backwards, even though you've gotten the right to vote in Selma, and we keep saying a change is going to come. And I think young people are so disillusioned that they don't see the need to vote because it does not affect them, whoever's sitting in the seat. And we know we have Breonna Taylor, we lost foot soldiers, and the people that were there then did not come back to help them afterwards. So was that similar? Did you feel that similar in your situation?
It's not similar, it is. It's what it is, and that's why I agreed to follow my nephew around this world, this country, talking to these young folks and trying to let the young folks know that they are in worse shape right now.
Yes, they are.
Than we were in 1965. We tried to tell them that the clubs and the tear gas that we got and we saw coming, you don't see it coming. I tell them that. They're in a suit, sitting in the Senate. They're dressed up. You don't see it happen. And we just went on with a pastor from Orlando. We just went on a trip with her, some of her kids from Florida, because they can't have stuff in their class anymore. They can't learn anything. So she contacted me to come with her, and I brought Charles into the picture, and she took him out. We went out in Selma and Montgomery, and when she brought him back, she debriefed them, she said. And that after that, they said, well, she wondered, how you feel about that? They said, well, we feel bad, but, nothing like that's going to happen to us. Wow.
And we deal with it at the museum. I always talk about we teach the future so we don't repeat the past, right? And so much of what you guys are talking about is so much of what we're trying to do. And having you guys here is just a testament of what we're trying to do for young people today. You know, we always talk about, and even I talk about our ancestors, but we need to be concerned about our descendants. That's where we need to be at. It's our descendants that we need to worry about now. So we even have to change our method on what we talk about because our descendants are in trouble right now. Yeah. Any other questions? There you go.
I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts and feelings about how they're now trying to reverse all the rights that we fought and that you would put so before? What are your thoughts and feelings about that? And do you have any encouraging words about what you would like us to do? This young man talked about Big Mama and Big Daddy. Well, we are the Big Mamas and Big Daddies. What would you encourage us to?
Well, big mamas and big daddies, talk to the kids, talk to the children. If they just get just a little piece of the history, I think that would give them reasons to want to do something about it. Voting is everything right now. If this is one bad year, we need everybody to go to the polls this year. And I tell some young folks that were old enough to vote on the last vote that we had in Cincinnati, and they were voting on marijuana. Everybody showed up. I said, this year we need you to show up like you did for Barack Obama and that marijuana. Because that marijuana is not gonna get you a job. It's not gonna make it possible for you to vote next year. But pretend the marijuana is on the ballot and I wanna see you back at the polls. I work the polls all the time. As I said, I'm the president of my club in my city. And I talk to young kids. I'm trying to get in the schools, all of the schools in my area, starting at 17 and a half, before the deadline for the date to register to vote. And that's what we need to do. We need to talk to these kids. We have some people working Kroger's, working the grocery store. When you walk there, they said, are you a registered voter? Are you a registered voter? And I tell the folks, even the folks at my church, I said, I don't need you to just go register. I need you to show up on voting day. Every time they open that door and put that flag out there and say, vote here, I want to see you there. That's when you need to be and show yourself, because registering means nothing if you're not going to go to the polls and vote.
And I want to add to that is, because she asked, what can we do? And I'm going to tell you one thing that really worked. And I know the kids don't believe it, so the parents are not believing it, is boycotting.
Oh, yes.
It works.
Yes.
You can do it silently. You can do it silently. You can stop where your money goes. Stop putting your money where you know they're not going to appreciate us and don't like. Stop. We can do that. And we boycotted the hamburger joint that we had to go up and get 25-cent hamburger at the window. Guess what? That place where we boycotted the Greyhound bus. Guess what? The Greyhound bus stopped running. We had a little bus come around in the neighborhood for 25 cents. Guess what? We boycotted, they have no bus to ride on. We had to get a ride. All of this stuff people say they don't want to deprive their children of what they didn't have. Deprive them a little bit.
Amen.
Deprive them just a little bit.
You know.
And still, they'll be okay. But don't give them something unless they're gonna show something. So, if you can't go vote, I can't get you those $100 sneakers.
If I can just interject before I pass the mic to this next gentleman, and then I'll come up front. When it comes to the young people and people in general, as my aunt said, I do drag them all over the place, but there's two sayings that I pass on to them. The first one is non-participation in part gives politicians permission to pay you no attention. That's the first thing. Then the second thing I tell them is not participating in the process is like cashing a check that somebody else worked for and then complaining because it's not big enough. See, it's not what it should be, but it ain't what it used to be in many instances. Now, many of the folks are the same. We have to keep that real. But every time you go to the front door of a restaurant and you don't have to go to the back door, that's a check you cash in that somebody else worked for. Every time that you can go to the hotel and check in wherever you want to check in, that's a check you're cashing that somebody else worked for. So when you take advantage of the work that folks like my aunt did, you're cashing a check that they worked for. And because it didn't give you everything that you wanted, you're complaining because it's really not big enough. But we cashing checks every day based upon the work that they put in.
Charles. Alice and Denise, I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to listen to this compelling story. You're both special people. But my question is, did you, either one of you, have the opportunity to interact personally with Dr. McKean? What was that experience like?
I have several times been in his presence, but had a chance to talk to him on the march. I think that was the very only time that I got to shake his hand and talk to him, sitting on a bale of hay at one of the campsites where everybody, just went up and he was just talking to everybody. And, he would say, I live in Atlanta. I mean, I worked the King Center voluntarily for years. So I saw the family and, and I know some of the family and, I got to see him. So I just didn't have any interaction with him, but the family, I have. So it was very enlightening then, and as a 16-year-old girl, it was like the thing that we needed to do. We went to shake Martin Luther King hand, and I followed him and I read about everything that he was doing and everywhere he was going. So that was my following for him. But like I said, I volunteered at the King Center for years.
And she's very humble about it, but they were actually trained by John Lewis. So these are folks that they got a chance to interact with in their engagement.
You got all these young children now that they know everything. But like my grandma used to say, you don't know you're behind from a hole in the ground. And I tell kids, I said, to break you, if we would take 1 year and put you back in segregation for 1 year, you would understand what you have now, appreciate what you have now, and try to go forward. Because back there, you didn't have it, But kids now, they don't appreciate it. And it's a different culture. When I was coming up, you had to say yes, ma'am, and yes, to everybody. The neighbor could whoop your behind, and you got home, got beat up again. My brother told me one day, he said, I don't know what's getting in these kids. I said, I wish the old man was still around. My brother said, no, you don't. Somebody got beat up by now because daddy didn't play with us. I don't have a chest down because I told him I wasn't going to walk a horse at church and try to snatch everything up, But what I'm getting at is the history that we have. Kids see the weak side of things, and they don't know that it took a lot of strength for us to have African history and Black history. And the things that these people stood for. Can you imagine Coretta Scott King closing the lid on that? She's not going to see her husband no more. Betty Shabazz, Merle Evers, can you imagine that? See, kids can't see that now, and that's a sad thing.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, thank you guys for what you did at a young age. And like you said earlier, there was a lot of young kids that was involved in that movement. But what I heard you guys say earlier about being traumatized by the events of the day, and that it took you all and probably people like you all that marched during that time a while, the trauma of it took you guys a while to talk about. Do you all think that that may be an opportunity that you all missed with the younger generation by not talking about it before you got older, and I'm quite sure that that's probably the case with more older people that were involved in that march. And one other thing that I wanted to say is that I was part of integration. I think I was in the 8th grade when I was integrated into a school that, that had students of all races and so forth. But I often think that integration also prevented the younger generations from hearing what the story was really about and how that being integrated affect the knowledge base that a lot of younger kids may have.
Well, I don't know if wait a minute. I don't think it was integration. I think it was a history that wasn't told.
Well, when we were integrated, in my case, my teachers in the beginning in segregation were all black.
Right.
I heard the story.
Right.
When I was integrated into
That's what I'm saying. They're not telling our story. That's why I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Yeah.
that was an opportunity that we missed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Personally speaking, I think in retrospect, the whole idea of integration was flipped when we were bust out into neighborhoods that we did not live in.
Let me pick on him, right? Let me pick him right now because I have a friend. We talk about this all the time. Integration did mess up a lot.
Yes, it did.
Because,
Culture.
and I talk about it a lot. In our school, our teachers cared. They cared about what we were doing. They listened to you. They talked to you. And we weren't learning all the history, but we sure learned what we had to learn.
Let me ask this question. Let me ask this question to everybody in here. We talk about teachers. At one time, teachers were the most respected job in the black community. A teacher. Our family started telling people that were telling our people we're too smart to teach because teaching didn't pay enough. So we changed our whole philosophy about teaching children to saying go get another job. So how many leaders did we have that we took out internally out of the system to encourage our children to go say chase a dollar? That's on us. We did that. And still we don't encourage our kids to be teachers.
I don't know, Bob, but that's adopting Eurocentric capitalism.
Okay.
That ain't on us.
It ain't on us?
That's something we adopted through what Bruh's talking about.
Okay.
That's an exterior ideology of ours.
Okay.
I mean, we carried it through, but we didn't start it.
No, I didn't say we started it. I'm saying we did it.
But to add to that, in integration, when they moved us to this integrated school, they moved their kids out.
Yes.
So
yes.
you got teachers that don't look like you.
Right,
Those students are gone somewhere else.
right.
And now these teachers are teaching us that don't look like us.
Right.
When I just left this motherly teacher over here that was teaching me everything I needed to know to become a woman. So when they moved your child to be integrated in that next school, they took all of their children and moved them on. So you still are not integrated only by having the teacher. The teacher. So all of those things played a part, but I know integration, my niece that's sitting right there, her mom is the baby. She's the only one in our family that was integrated into a school.
And
Out of the 13 living children, her mother was the only one that graduated from an integrated school where everybody else left and left them there. They could have stayed where they were.
to answer part of your question, that had we talked about this sooner, was that a missed opportunity? Definitely. That was a missed opportunity. I tell people all the time, I said, there's a missing generation. We're missing a whole generation of people. So yes, we missed that one.
But you can't be too hard on yourself. You have to give yourself grace.
That's part of the trauma that you talked about earlier, that where you wasn't you didn't feel, you weren't comfortable talking about it.
Right.
Older people that I've talked to that's been to the military, they say they don't talk about it.
Right, exactly. That's what I said. I think you just bury it and hope it goes away, pretend it never happened. So yes.
And you got people that don't want to hear it. When you hear so many times, I don't want to hear that. I don't want you to talk about that old stuff. I don't want you. If you hear that about 10 times, you shut up. That's true. You shut up for a while, but I thank God for bringing me back where I can talk about it, and I talk about it and talk about it a lot. As long as He gives me breath, strength, and life, I will talk about it now. My grandchildren knew about it. One of my grandchildren in the 5th grade called me up to talk to her on the phone so she could do a 5th grade project. My oldest granddaughter, she knows about it. Now I got a 16-year-old grandson. Now it's like, gotta wheel him in. He's 16. The other one's the one that wanted to do the project, she's 20-something. And the other one is 30-something. So the 16-year-old now, there's a lot of other forces out there. And, and I stop and ask him, do you know what your grandma, he said, yeah, and I don't believe him. So I get him to tell me a little something about it. And he knows. He knows. But sometimes he acts like he doesn't know. So, you have to change the children's mind where they are, because they are somewhere that you can't even imagine. They're somewhere out there that you can't even imagine. And not that they're bad kids or anything, but it's the surroundings they're in and what they have to do. So just keep asking and keep telling them to tell you something. Let us know what you know. And I keep telling him, don't be a follower, be a leader. That's right. Be a leader. Don't follow those kids. Be a leader. So that's what we have to do for our grandchildren. Now, I ain't got no children no more. I got grandchildren. My 2 daughters grown. So it's like the grandchildren. You just have to keep instilling in them. And that's what we need to do. And that's why we got grandma say, you tell them, I don't babysit, but, we'll talk to them. But, you have to keep reeling them in. And just let them, tell them to tell you something about something good that will make a difference for them. Just pick them, pick their brain. I'm always picking my 16-year-old brain. He laughs at me, but I keep on. I pick his brain.
Well, that's about time to come to end, is what you're looking at?
Well, I wanted to say something, and I know we have at least one more question, but just to this particular piece, Mr. Collins and I were having a conversation before we came out and started today. We were talking about history and how my people, this is what I'm talking about right now, we have moved to a place where we do not value our history. So we don't. And one of the things that I spoke to him about was the fact that in Mississippi right now, they're trying to get it on the books where they have a Confederacy Month. So they're gonna, because we have, to them, they said, you have Black History Month, we want Confederacy Month. And see, what that speaks to me is something that I already know, which is that even for those who, quote unquote, try to lift up their heritage and tell their stories, no matter how ugly they are, they raise them up. They give value to it. And we have got to get back to the place, especially as young folks, where we value the work that was put in. There is too much disrespect in my culture for that work. As she said, they don't, they want to hear it when it's old, it didn't do this and nothing is flawless. Nothing is perfect. But it is up to us to build on the work. First, we have to know the work, respect the work. Don't disrespect the work if you haven't done any work. That's what I say. Don't disrespect it. Look at it evaluate it, see the good that was brought about by it, and then build on it. We have to value our history. We have to value our culture like everybody else does. I have Jewish friends and that's what they do. They tell their stories, and they tell their stories, and they tell their stories, and they value their stories. Don't let anybody any longer disrespect our history. I don't care who they are. That's a no-go for me from the jump. You can talk to me about what it didn't do, and I can hear that, and I understand that because we have to look at it and evaluate it properly, but we can't allow anybody to disrespect it. We just can't, because it was too much work and too much that was lost that went into that to where, you know, it was just too much. But I'm gonna move over to the next person.
While he's walking over there, I just want to, I'm working on something now, and I just want everybody to think about it and maybe just kind of dig a little deeper. Read about discrimination and racism. Those two things. We don't realize today discrimination doesn't come from the people that are racist sometimes. You're discriminated with your own. We have to straighten them out too.
Yes, Lord.
So look at and read some things about discrimination, and then read some things about racism. Sometimes the discrimination does not come from the people with the racism. And I had to fight for my first job in 1970, 20 years old. I had to go to court, sue somebody at 20 years old to give me my job that I was supposed to have. Now that was discrimination. I don't think that was racism. That was something put in place by somebody else, because there were a lot of lovely people in that place that I worked for 34 years. And there were some racism there, but that wasn't what not caused me to get my job. That wasn't racism. That was discrimination. And your sisters and brothers, your church, look at where your discrimination, that holds you down and holds you back. So it's just something that God gave to me to start looking at and just researching and look at the meaning of the two. And they're different. You can be discriminated by anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Well, I think this is probably one of the most meaningful things we've done. I want to applaud both of you queens for what you brought to us. Oh, is there another question?
One more thing.
Oh, one more question. I'm sorry.
My brother overlooks me, but that's you talk about being traumatized, but you know, if you think about it, busing caused a lot of traumatized for my age group, right? We know it happened. We can still see the signs of the stores that you don't go to anymore, even though it might change. But we didn't talk about it. So that was another time that kids missed that opportunity, right? So my question is, you know, when you get a certain age, even though I have kids all day long in my camp, they don't even want to hear it so much. So do you teach it to younger folks where they can reach the younger folks? How do you do that? Because they don't want to hear from me talking about busing. You know, so how do you reach them?
I think you should start at a very early age. You don't have to just push it all in on a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, but you can feed it to them. Start feeding information to them at a very early age.
Well, if we look at the Jewish community, they teach their kids their history at 3 years old. And when they teach their kids, they tell them they're survivors. They tell them that they survived the Holocaust. They survived Jerusalem from making bricks, straws into bricks. And then they tell their kids never to forget and never again. That's the depthness of what they teach their children. Never forget and never again. We tell our children our history doesn't matter. So if we teach our history from the time our kids from the womb, we wouldn't be fighting it now. We have to do that. There's an African proverb that says the greatest king plants shade trees knowing they never sit up under them. So we're supposed to plant the trees of knowledge, the trees of love, trees of ambition. That's our role as parents and as a people. So I always say my role is to plant the shade trees.